Heartbeat Alaska is brought to you by Coca-Cola, providing Alaskans with quality soft drinks since 1937.
By Cook Inlet Region Incorporated, an Alaska Native corporation promoting economic and social progress for people throughout the state. The generous support of the Alaska Native Health Board.
Welcome to Heartbeat Alaska. I'm Jeannie Green.
And I'm Gary Fife.
Bringing you Native news across the North and the nation. On today's Heartbeat Alaska, we visit the community of Old Harbor on Kodiak Island. The Alaska Native Health Board interview is with us once again. All that plus much, much more. But first, here's Gary with National Native News.
Thank you, Jeannie. This is National Native News. I'm Gary Fife. A U.S. Senate committee that oversees parks is considering a proposal that would create a memorial to the 1890 Wounded Knee Massacre. The bill by South Dakota Senators Tom Daschle and Larry Pressler would set up a park cooperatively managed by the Oglala and Cheyenne River Sioux and the National Park Service. But Park Service officials in Washington are hesitant about the idea. They say they'll have to study it to decide if they can sign on to the plan. They do say the nature of the Wounded Knee site means it ought to be treated in a culturally sensitive way. The U.S. Senate Indian Affairs Committee has approved a resolution that would call on the federal government to apologize for overthrowing the Hawaiian monarchy a century ago. The measure, sponsored by Hawaiian Native Senator Daniel Akaka, is aimed at educating Americans about the overthrow that has hurt the Hawaiian Native people. Indian Affairs Committee Chairman Daniel Inouye, who also represents Hawaii, says the government owes an apology for its actions a century ago. The Senate passed a similar resolution last year, but the House failed to act before the end of the 102nd Congress. There have always been jokes about Indian time and how some Native Americans may have a different perception of time. For Eskimos in the Bering Sea, they decided to take the idea further and create their own time zone, Little Diomede Time. The 180 residents of the remote Bering Strait Island moved their clocks back 3 hours on Sunday, August 1st. It's not a rebellion, but a bow to practical needs. Natives of Little Diomede say they want more daylight for hunting, and so their school children will not have to travel in the dark. The Northern Cheyenne tribe of Montana has been trying to get its own high school built on their reservation, but the plan has not been popular with school officials off the reservation. An attorney for the Cheyennes admits that the project won't be easy, but says there is devotion and tenacity on the reservation to make it work. But a lawyer for the local Coal Strip School District says their school has a solid academic record and has served tribal students well. He added there are too many ifs in the Cheyenne plan. Their arguments were made to State Superintendent of Public Instruction Nancy Keenan. She must decide whether or not to uphold the hearing examiner's earlier decision to approve the new school district for the tribe. The examiner approved the idea in May, saying it would shorten lengthy bus rides, reduce dropout rates, get parents involved, and emphasize teaching of tribal language and culture. It would be located near Lame Deer and serve 200 students. And finally, in 3 years, the Coeur d'Alene tribe of Idaho has successfully provided health care for their members, and now they've broken ground for a new clinic. The tribe has begun a $1 million expansion of their Benowa Medical Center in Plummer, Idaho. The tribally owned facility serves non-natives in the area as well as natives from neighboring Washington and Montana. Tribal elders called the project a promise coming through. This is National Native News, and for Heartbeat Alaska, I'm Gary Fife.
We have always felt in harmony with the land.
Chakome, Tapua, the Skumuk, Ta tapiachu, kenok anesche, matapiwa, makaspumos, akum.
Help the Soil Conservation Service help our Earth. Call us today. We owe it to our children.
Hey, thanks to these airbags here, this job is now a piece okay, Claire.
But Vince...
Yeah, I'll tell you something, partner. I just might stick around a few more years.
But Vince...
No more dashboard du jour or Vince under glass, huh?
But Vince...
Look out!
Even with airbags, Vince, you still got to remember to buckle your safety belt.
Now you tell me.
You could learn a lot from a dummy. Buckle your safety belt.
If you have news or information from your village or community, please call Heartbeat Alaska, area code 907-563-3507, or fax 907-563-7079.
I watch Heartbeat Alaska a lot of time. My name is George Inga Sr. Old Harbor, Alaska.
Thank you very much, Mr. George Inga Sr. Mr. Inga is an Aleut man who lives in Old Harbor, Alaska. Old Harbor is located on Kodiak Island on the southeast coast. It's a fishing community that sits on a flat between Sitkalitik Strait and steep mountains. This location is ideal. Eastward from the village is Sitkalitik Island, protecting the village from the open seas, while Sitkalitik Strait provides ready access for the village fishing fleet. Many of Old Harbor's residents are commercial fishermen. Approximately 32 fishing boats in Old Harbor reside year-round and up to 100 during fishing season.
Smile now, smile!
The sea plays a major role in the lives of the people of Old Harbor, just as it's done for thousands of years. It's believed that the roots of today's island native population go back in an unbroken line for thousands of years, contrary to one previously held theory that the Konyags came into the area only about 1,000 years ago, replacing the former culture with their own. Today, many activities are centered around the Russian Orthodox faith. However, first contact with the non-native outsiders has been called the Wounded Knee of Alaska, as the Russians attempted to subdue the resisting native population in the 1700s. The massacre took place at Refuge Rock, near the modern-day village of Old Harbor, on which the natives had established a village fortress. The written historical record begins with Grigory Shelikov's establishment of a Russian-American settlement in 1784. This settlement became known as Three Saints Bay and served as a staging area for the Russian fur trade. Subject to geological disturbances, the settlement was destroyed by a tsunami in 1788, followed by two very damaging earthquakes in 1792. The settlement then was relocated to what is now Kodiak City in 1793, and although the record is not clear, most certainly the relocation involved only non-native people. The natives remained in Three Saints Bay to rebuild their lives. The next mention of a settlement in this area occurs in 1893, when the census refers to a Russian name meaning Old Harbor. The people of this native community have proven that invasion by outsiders and earthquakes cannot move them. On Good Friday in 1964, the major earthquake that hit Alaska was followed in Old Harbor by devastating tidal waves, wiping out the entire village except for two houses and the Russian Orthodox church building. The survival of the church building proved to be an important sign to the people of Old Harbor. The night of the earthquake, the residents scrambled up the mountain above their village and huddled together and watched their homes disappear underwater. But even that memory could not keep them from rebuilding their homes. And glorious should Christmas dawn, for today, the building continues. Last week, the residents of Old Harbor dedicated their new airstrip.
One big step for Old Harbor, which is everybody's going to push it.
Got you on camera, Monty.
Don't tell me that, Mark. Don't tell me you got that landing on camera.
And this landing's going to Jeannie Green. Hey, Monty, that landing wasn't so bad. In Old Harbor, if you're not piloting your plane, you're probably piloting your fishing boat, or during 4th of July, racing your fishing boat.
Pretty wild out there. Oh my God! Look at that, they look like. Yeah, Rob. Coming this way. Look at that.
Old Harbor does well economically through participation in the fishing industry. However, fishing income and the market economy have not totally replaced the native traditions of Old Harbor. The tradition of sharing with one another. Perhaps the most important thing about the village of Old Harbor are the people. The good people who chose to stay. How about those boat races only in Alaska? Not to worry, though. Although it looked very treacherous, no one is ever hurt, and these boat captains know what they're doing. They race every single 4th of July. Speaking of boat races, I heard from some viewers in Fort Providence, Northwest Territories. Hello to Mr. Leon Bonnet Rouge and his mother Pauline. They're members of the Southern Slavey Indian tribe in that area. And they promised me some more boat races, this time canoe races from that area. I'd like to thank the people that helped me on the Old Harbor story, the Old Harbor Tribal Council, Tilly Christensen, and my videographers, Wanda Price, Mike Posnick, and Mike Ronstead. Thank you so much for your help in that story. We'll return with more news from Heartbeat, Alaska, right after these messages.
One, do you know the difference between HIV and AIDS? Two, how safe? The virus does not discriminate.
Jacob.
Ruby.
Joseph.
The names are many,
Walter,
people from the bush,
Buddy,
people from the cities,
Alex,
Eskimos,
Susan,
Aleuts, Indians.
George,
They're all our people.
Peter,
Deaths from alcoholism must stop.
Herman,
And there's help.
Julie,
It's at the Alaska Native
Moses,
Alcoholism Recovery Center.
Daniel,
Call Anarch now
Alice,
for yourself,
Tommy,
for a friend,
Carl,
or for a family member.
Mike,
Honor our
Jane,
dead,
Jack,
but celebrate life.
Sergey,
Call Anarch.
Sam,
Rachel.
The Alaska Native Health Board interview is with us once again. Today, Ann Walker talks with Frank Gonzales, clinical psychologist for the Indian Health Service. Inhalants can be devastating.
Today I'm talking with Frank Gonzales, the area clinical psychologist for the Indian Health Service in Alaska. He's also the coordinator for inhalant abuse prevention activities for the Alaska area. Frank, just how serious is the problem of inhalant abuse among Alaska Natives, and in particular Alaska Native children?
Well, Anne, the numbers are a little bit deceiving in that the typical pattern for most kids is that they will experiment with different types of inhalants, gasoline, solvents, that sort of thing, and generally after a short course of use tend to leave them alone. The numbers show that an amazingly high number of children in Alaska experiment with inhalants, but there are those who will continue to use inhalants all the way into adulthood. The real indicator of the seriousness of the problem is the fact that more and more younger children are starting to use, and we've had documented cases of children as young as 3, 4 years old using inhalants. Another thing is that we're starting to see more and more children dying with exposure to inhalants. Try to remember that when you inhale, this goes into your lungs, and all the blood throughout your body gets air from the lungs, so this stuff circulates all over your body. It affects different organs different ways. And what happens many times is with exposure to the solvents, the heart muscle sometimes will stop and children die suddenly from inhalant abuse. So the numbers are a little bit deceiving. It's a little bit like a game of Russian roulette. 6 people are involved, only one person gets hurt, but the person that gets hurt very badly.
Frank, you mentioned how inhalants go through the body from the lungs and affect organs in your body differently. How is inhalant abuse different from other drug abuse?
Inhalants are generally a lot more available than other types of drugs. That's why they're the drug of choice with many kids. So kids will tend to overuse inhalants very often, especially in the village where the factor of boredom comes into play. Also, the manner in which solvents will affect such a widespread area of the body does make it a bit different. Dosages tend to be higher, and the impact seems to be spread much further. The impact on the nervous system is very, very dramatic in that the different types of tissue in the nervous system will tend to soak up the solvent and store it for a while, and after a while that tissue will start to break down and become much less effective. And we're talking about, the brain, the nerves, and those sorts of organs.
Frank, I'm curious, how can a parent or a person tell if someone has been abusing inhalants immediately or, say, the next day? Can you visually tell if somebody is using inhalants or abusing inhalants?
Well, naturally, any kind of sign that's typical of any kind of substance abuse should key them in that something is going on. A decline in grades, moodiness, a sudden temper outburst. That should be a sign to parents that something is wrong. Now, when you're talking about inhalants, oftentimes if the inhalant of choice is gasoline, a child will tend to get a rash around the face depending upon how they're using. If it can be, the manner in which inhalants are used are either with a rag, a soaked rag to the face, or in a bag. And many times you'll get a rash around the mouth and nose. That's a pretty good indicator that inhalants are being used. Many times a child will take on the odor of the solvent that's being used, whether that be Blazo or gasoline or any of the solvents that kids use to inhale, they'll actually emanate an odor. They'll smell like the stuff that they're using. Kids will tend to become clumsy. Oftentimes runny nose is a telltale sign, red eyes. Any of those signs are pretty good indicators that your child is using some sort of an intoxicant, and that should draw the parents' attention.
What kind of programs currently exist to help prevent or treat inhalant abuse?
The number of programs throughout the United States are starting to grow. There's a program in North Dakota called Our Home that is dedicating itself to treatment of inhalant abusers. It's a very long-term program, I think something like 1 to 2 years of treatment. And they're sort of designing the program as they go along. It's a real courageous approach to inhalant abuse to focus individually on these kids. That is partially funded by Indian Health Service. There's also another program in Canada that is also a multi-year treatment program. And one of the things I'm really excited about is the Norton Sound, in the Norton Sound area, there's some efforts to get a grant for a treatment facility in the Nome area for funding of a treatment facility here in Alaska.
Prevention-wise?
Prevention, there's a lot of education activities going on currently right now, but as far as a treatment facility goes, there are none in Alaska, and there are efforts being made to fund that. But the folks in Nome, as far as Alaska goes, are really on the cutting edge of prevention activities, education activities going on to the village and responding to a lot of the misunderstood factors of inhalant abuse in the village with both the parents and the children.
What can parents and other community members do at the local level to fight this problem?
You got to remember that much of the inhalant abuse problem occurs in the rural areas, areas in which kids don't have a lot of activities. There is a community in Northwest Alaska that has formed an inhalant abuse committee. And their strategy is to give the kids more things to do, to try to obtain funding from their regional corporation, to build an activity center, to get the elders much more involved in training of traditional arts and traditional activities, to get the kids involved in prevention activities, to get them invested in getting the message across to the younger kids that this is no longer a cool thing to be doing. If you can involve a large portion of the community, from elders to parents to the kids themselves, that's going to go a long way towards preventing the spread of this.
Thank you very much, Frank. Today,
Thank you.
I've been talking with Frank Gonzales, the area clinical psychologist for the Indian Health Service in Alaska. We've been talking about inhalant abuse. For Heartbeat Alaska and Alaska Native Health Board, I'm Ann Walker.
The goal of Heartbeat Alaska is to spread news and information to our Native people across the North. Thank you, Alaska Native Health Board and Ann Walker, for giving us the opportunity to do just that. That was an excellent in-depth interview with Dr. Frank Gonzales of the Indian Health Service. We turn now to Barrow for a commentary from Elise Patkotak.
I've built a house that contains less than 1,000 square feet of living space, but over 4,500 square feet of storage space in my bathroom alone. Add in the cabinets, drawers, and closets scattered tastefully throughout every other available inch of my new home, and you have enough room to store most of the remaining U.S. arsenal. I am unashamed and defiantly unrepentant about this matter. I have spent the past 20 years living in bush Alaskan homes. All of these homes were designed by the same architect. He was a man. Of this I have absolutely no doubt. He was a man who carried all of his belongings in his duffel bag. He thought cabinets were the cheap rooms on a ship. I can still remember the first time I entered the rental unit I lived in for 13 years. I walked through it, left, went back to my office, and sat there thinking that something was just not right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Then I realized I'd just walked through a 3-bedroom house that did not have one cabinet. Not a linen closet, nothing, nada, niente. Prior to moving to this 3-bedroom house, I'd lived in a 1-room home. When you used the bathroom, your knees protruded through the coyly hung curtain and touched the knees of the person sitting on the couch. This made for some interesting conversation. On the other hand, you were never left out of it. This bathroom space was also the closest I got to a closet in that house. People in the bush tend to order lots of items in bulk. That lovely object art, the bush chair, has its origins in this habit. When you have no place to shove those extra few cases of paper towels or soda, you tastefully stack them in your living room, drape a piece of brightly colored cloth over them, and call the results an easy chair. No, I will not apologize for the amount of storage space in my new home. I know I can fit a family of 5 in my bathroom cabinets and still have room left over for toothpaste. It's a wonderful feeling, and I'm proud of it.
Before I leave, I'd like to say hello to our viewers in Fairbanks and Juneau. They've only been watching Heartbeat Alaska for the past month or so, and we're glad to have you with us. If you have any news from your village or community, please give me a call. I welcome your video. For Heartbeat Alaska, I'm Jeannie Green. See you next week.